Hello and welcome to another Smaulgld live stream. It is Wednesday evening, January 9th, 2019. And tonight's topic is Witness the Trump Pump and the Powell Put. We're going to discuss the stock market going forward, looking back, and figure out what Donald Trump and the Fed may have to do with keeping the stock market valuations higher. Now, last night we had an interesting conversation. We talked about what to expect during a national emergency, and we were talking in advance of Donald Trump's speech to the nation and Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer's response, and we pretty much accurately called what was going to happen. Trump would not declare a state of national emergency, but what he would do was lay the groundwork for doing so. We're going to cover what happened today in a continuing saga of the border battle over the wall, and there was some interesting news. But first, let's take a look at what happened in our markets, in the gold and silver markets, the equity markets, and of course the cryptocurrency markets. In the gold market, we had a decent day today. I wouldn't say it was a bad day. I wouldn't say it was a good day. I would say that gold went up a little bit. It went up $8. $8, less than 1%, but up 0.64%. Was up most of the day. It was up, and it finished close to the highs. We're moving now back towards that $1,300 level, which is, I suppose, psychologically important, but we're not really there yet. We're at $1,293, and in the after hours, we're at $1,292.50. So not much of a change there, but again, this is a market. The gold market has been grinding higher now for about 8 to 9 weeks. And, as we've mentioned, silver is following, and that's a good sign. Don't expect silver to burst ahead of gold until gold makes, probably I would say, a more significant move higher. And today we saw precisely that. We saw gold ahead of silver most of the day, and silver did manage to pull out a gain equal to the gold gain. And silver today closed at $15.73, and now we're approaching the $16 psychological mark for silver. We at one point briefly dipped below 14 last year. We moved through to 15, and now we're heading towards 16. That was up 0.62%. And what did that do for the unsustainable gold silver ratio? Because silver is rarer than gold, and we could not lead our lives without silver. And all that, well, it pretty much stayed about the same, 82.21 to 1. By the way, I just got word from Mr. Kennedy at Kennedy Financial. He is arranging a debate between myself and the silver guru, David Morgan. I'm not sure what the topics are, what there is to debate, but that'll take place towards the end of the month. So that is a pre-announcement. They haven't, I think they want to promote it in some respect. I'm not sure what there is to promote, but I'll be happy to get on the line and discuss the world of silver with those two gentlemen. Okay, U.S. Mint. By the way, we now have U.S. Mint numbers for January, and they're not bad so far. We'll see how they go. This is the second reporting they've done in the last couple of days. Silver Eagles, 2.796 million sold so far. Not bad. And then 31,000 1-ounce American Gold Eagles. You generally like to see well over 4 million in the first month. Every year, U.S. Mint sells at least 5 million for the past few years. It's somewhat of an indicator on how the year is going to go, but the real indicator comes in February and March to see if there's any sell-through, because dealers do grab their inventory at the beginning of the year a lot, and the authorized purchasers need to bulk up at the beginning of the year if they want to continue to be authorized purchasers. They basically have to continue to buy a certain amount of Silver Eagles, so they buy them up front. You won't know what retail demand is until you see those secondary February and March numbers to see whether the authorized purchasers need to replenish an inventory that they're then going to on-sell to the bullion dealers. But not a bad, it's not like there's no demand right now. Decent demand, but we'll have to wait and see how that goes into February and March. Also, interesting story here, just briefly mention it, because oil was up today. Oil was up about 5-6%. It climbed over $49 a barrel into about 52. Right now it's at 52.20. But we note here that BP has just discovered billions of barrels of oil in the Gulf of Mexico. So another peak oil story, I suppose. And one other thing, we may cover this if this story continues to develop along the lines that it might. JP Morgan Silver. Now remember, the whole JP Morgan story, which I pay no attention to, and I think there's zero substance to it, that JP Morgan owns a certain amount of Silver Eagles, a certain amount of Canadian Maple Leafs, and some other amount of gold held elsewhere, and they've got hundreds of millions of ounces, and they're just waiting for it to go up. I don't believe any of that. I think none of that's documented, and it's a bunch of nonsense. But the one place where you can say that JP Morgan has control over silver, not necessarily ownership, is in their COMEX-approved vault, and they have in that vault 147.2 million ounces. Now, if the idea is that they're building that stockpile, it looks like they've lost in the last 3 weeks about 10 million ounces. They were up to around 156 million ounces. It's gone down to 147. Again, I don't even think that this is JP Morgan's silver. Just like all the other vaults, they hold this on behalf of clients. This is in the 1,000-ounce bars, 9995. In fact, David Morgan actually is on my side of the fence on this. He believes that JP Morgan doesn't have the silver for a different reason than I believe, but I agree with his rationale for it. So we'll probably discuss that in the debate as well. But JP Morgan, I'm keeping an eye on this because this is the only silver that you can actually even argue somehow is owned by JP Morgan because it's under their control. It doesn't mean they own it. But if this number falls, then there's really no substance at all to the story whatsoever. And we also need to cover briefly what's going on in the news. Rod Rosenstein back in the news, and today it was announced that as we get the new Attorney General, if he does indeed get approved through Congress, Barr is his name, there was original reports that Rosenstein would resign. Sounded like effective immediately if that was the case. And now they're saying he's planning to stay on for a time after William Barr is confirmed to ensure a smooth transition. This is leading people to speculate that this should all coincide with the ending of the Mueller probe and that Rosenstein will get that report, show it to Barr. Well, this is all remains to be seen what's going to happen there. But again, Rosenstein leaving is just another one of all of the many people that were involved in the, and effectively Mueller will be gone too, because you'll have had Comey, Strzok, Page. There's a whole bunch of people left over in the Justice Department and in Sessions and in the FBI that are now gone. You've lost Clapper. You've lost Brennan. There's a whole bunch of people. So there is a new FBI, I wouldn't say staff, whatever that ninth floor is or whatever. There's new personnel. And I suppose when Barr gets in, he will also appoint his own deputy. I'm sure it won't be Rod Rosenstein. And then we'll see how we go from there. And I think the rest of the news is going to be Trump, because now we move on to Trump's border battle. But first of all, before we get into the border part, Trump did pass. Remember last night we were talking about that he would focus not on the wall for purposes of curbing illegal immigration, but for purposes of curbing criminality, human trafficking, drug peddling, and human rights abuses in the form of women and children being abused on the route through caravans. And that would be his rationale to claim a national emergency along the southern border. Not, I want a wall because we have an immigration issue and we're not able to process people enough, and we need a wall to do that. He's been arguing that we need it to stop human trafficking, drug peddling, and the like. And he signed legislation today that was an anti-human trafficking bill. I did not get a chance to read it, so I'll check that out tomorrow, and we'll just take a look at what he's talking about there. But in the big news today on this border wall battle, Trump met with Nancy Pelosi. He met with Chuck Schumer. And it seemed like the meeting was short. There were a couple of different versions of this event. Trump's version was that he left the meeting with Chuck and Nancy. He called it a total waste of time. He says, what is going to happen in 30 days if I quickly open things up? Are you going to approve border security, which includes a wall or a steel barrier? And Nancy said no, and I said bye-bye, nothing else worked. Okay, Pence said something similar. I heard him say this one. This is me paraphrasing. He said when Trump asked Pelosi if he opened the government, would she fund the wall? She said no. And then Trump said, we have nothing to talk about, and left the Situation Room. Chuck Schumer said something a little different, but there was clearly the accounts are that they came to a disagreement and Trump left. But Chuck Schumer made it sound like Trump slammed his hands on the table and stormed out in a very immature way. And I think Steve Scalise says that's not what happened, that he just left calmly, but there's got to be some drama in all this. Schumer's version was the president just got up and walked out. He asked Speaker Pelosi, will you agree to my wall? She said no. And he just got up and said, then we have nothing to discuss, and walked out. And then he's talking about what a child he is. And I think that is the lay of the land. However, we have to keep in mind, I just want to close 2 points from last night on how this might all play out. I have been analyzing it along the lines that Trump is laying the groundwork to either get a deal, where the Democrats should want to get a deal now because it's going to be harder to get a deal later if the Supreme Court rules in favor of President Trump stopping or rescinding President Obama's presidential memoranda on DACA, which would mean that would be off the table. Trump wouldn't have to give up any type of immigration reform that would include that if the Supreme Court said he's entitled to rescind what Obama had given. And therefore, the Democrats should do a deal, but it looks like they're not interested in doing a deal. They're more interested, I believe, to their constituency. They owe them not so much a deal on the Dreamers or to get DACA extended or anything with immigration. I think the deal that they want to pass for their constituency, even though they didn't run on stopping the wall, they want to stop Trump. And one way they think they can stop Trump is by stopping the wall. And this way, when Trump goes to run in 2020, he can't say, I got the wall. And that may not help Democrats win, but it may help Congress people and so on, but it may help a Democratic presidential candidate beat Donald Trump because they effectively stopped his wall. Now, that's a high-stakes game because, as we know, Trump has been laying the groundwork for declaring a national emergency. Now, we know what will happen if he declares a national emergency, starts to get work done on the wall. The first thing that's going to happen is the Democrats are going to pass a resolution saying there isn't a national emergency, as we discussed last night when we went through the statute. The problem with that approach is it's not going to work because under a Supreme Court ruling or some ruling in 1983, they can pass a resolution, but it's something that if Congress acts, in order for it to become a law, the president has to sign it. And the president, if he gets a bill from Congress rescinding his resolution that there's an emergency, he's just not going to sign it. And then what has to happen is Congress and Senate, they have to override his veto by 2/3, and that's not going to happen. So the next thing that'll happen, they probably will pass the resolution anyway, is someone's going to bring a court case to get an injunction against the construction work that's going on the southern border for whatever reason, environmental reasons. It's going to impact the free movement of people, whatever it is. Someone's going to be impacted, and they're going to claim that it's a problem and that Trump isn't allowed to do it, and we have to have an injunction. And that'll probably come out of the Ninth Circuit, coming out of some judge in San Francisco, and then all work will stop, and then it'll end up having to go to the Supreme Court. Now, when it goes to the Supreme Court, that'll be in the summertime. By then, Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg may be off the court, so the 5-4 majority that's held now would be 5-3, and if Trump actually can approve, which he may be able to do, a replacement for Ginsburg by the summer, then it would be 6-3, and then what would happen is that presidential emergency, clearly the Supreme Court would give deference to Trump declaring an emergency at the border and overrule whatever Ninth Circuit decision. So it's quite possible in the summertime you will have two Supreme Court cases. You'll have the wall issue being settled, that Trump is allowed to declare a national emergency, and then they'll start building the wall. And the other thing you'll have is that the DACA presidential memoranda, that was issued by Obama was either unconstitutional or it's constitutional that Trump can rescind a former president's executive order. Now, that makes the most sense because even if what President Obama did was constitutional, which I don't think it is, because if Congress is the one that's supposed to set immigration law, the president can't just decide by memoranda, oh, we're just going to give these people another 2 years to figure out what they're going to do. But even so, even assuming that that passes constitutional muster, it would make no sense whatsoever for the next president not to be able to rescind a presidential memorandum, because that would mean that once a president signs a memorandum, he effectively puts his mark on, effectively you have President Obama's DACA program in perpetuity because no subsequent president can ever get rid of it. So I don't think that's going to last. So you're going to have probably 2 Supreme Court cases in favor of Donald Trump. Now, what does that mean for, you got to go back to the budget now, because remember, this continuing resolution where they want the $5 billion isn't a budget. I think it only takes them through to February. So what happens if Trump decides to declare the national emergency and starts building the wall, and then the Democrats say, okay, you got your wall, now approve this budget? Trump could still say, I'm not approving jack. I'm not approving this budget. I'm not approving this continuing resolution. Now, the problem with that is then you're going to start getting people who aren't getting their paychecks. I think at the end of February, then the food stamps run out. So he probably doesn't want all that negative publicity. So he might sign something, but he might sign a continuing resolution that only goes through for another few months. Take you through to the period of time when the Supreme Court rules on his wall, rules on DACA. And now, I think at that point, if all this works out, I believe you'll have a situation by the end of the summer where you still don't have a full budget. You're still wrangling over stuff, but Trump has the green light for his wall, and he has the green light to rescind the DACA program. Now, the budget's going to come up again, either a continuing resolution or a budget. And now when they go to do the budget, the Democrats aren't going to be able to ask for certain things on immigration because Trump can always refuse to do it, and he's got his wall. So I think that's how it's going to play out. Could be wrong, but that's the scenario as I've tried to objectively view it, because I see what most people do. They do it in gold and silver. They want a result and they figure out how to get there, and they come up with all types of rationale. So I'd like to hear another path in how Trump doesn't get the wall. And the way I thought he might not get the wall, the way he might not get the wall is he goes to the national emergency. He gets shut down by the Ninth Circuit, and the Supreme Court doesn't rule on it for a long, long time, and maybe does rule on it and doesn't give it to him. Says this is not a national emergency, in which case then he's done. Because if he doesn't get the wall and he's played this high-stakes game, then it's too late to then try to... There's no way he's going to get the existing Congress before 2020 to approve the funds for the wall. That's the only way I think he doesn't get the wall. Now, that doesn't mean if he gets the wall, he wins in 2020. But I think if he plays this game and the Supreme Court strikes him down, that would be a crushing defeat because he would be presumed to have had, especially if he gets the replacement of Ruth Bader Ginsburg before the case comes to the Supreme Court, then he would be effectively a spent political force because he couldn't get a presidential emergency declaration, which should be a slam dunk, through even a neutral Supreme Court. He couldn't get it through a Supreme Court in which he had packed with 2 or 3 members and should have a 5-4 or 6-3 majority. Okay, well, that's it on the wall. Now, so one more thing. Today, Trump is a very busy man here. Trump to seek bill giving him broad powers to raise tariffs. Now, that's interesting, too. We haven't forgotten about the whole China issue and all the trade wars going on, and that's going to affect our markets going forward. But right now, we're going to move on to our topic of the evening, the Trump pump and the Powell put. Uh-oh, we got a moron here.
Presenting the distinguished international news commentator and foreign correspondent,
Smaulgld. This has been an extraordinary week in world affairs.
No, I told Hillary Clinton that that's moronic.
Yes, indeed. You know, there's one other thing. Speaking of moronic, I saw this the other day, and I didn't comment on. Well, I commented on it on Where did she go? Where did she go? I commented on it on Twitter, but I didn't comment on it here. And maybe I'm not going to comment on it here because I can't find it. All right, well, I'll do it tomorrow night. Not a big deal. It's relatively timeless, so it doesn't really matter. Okay. What you're looking at right now is the Dow Jones Industrial Average from 2014 to just today. And one of the things that we've been, you probably forget about this, but every so often we get these big pullbacks, and that is when all the I told you so's come out, and that's when the all unsustainables come out, and that's when the whole dollar collapse, stock market collapse, end of everything, it comes. Eventually, unsustainable, all that comes out when these things happen. And I don't have the quotes, but I've been following the markets daily for at least my whole life, but really intently since the financial crisis. And you can see here in 2014, the beginning of the year, you saw it again at the beginning of 2016. You can see where I put the arrows there. Now, they don't look that big, where I have the arrows from 2014 to 2016. That's only because we've grown so much since 2016. But those are big drops. And that was the whole game over, collapse the system. That was it right there. Each one of those arrows represents a big, big drop on a percentage term there. You got like from, it looks like, 18,000 down to 15,000. You got like 17,000 down to 15,000. Those are bigger moves, couple of 100-point moves, when the market is at 16,000 instead of, going from 27,000 to 23,000. They're similar size moves. They just don't look as big. But my point is that we've seen this before. Look at 2018, all the way to the right. You see the same thing. Now, the most recent move is a little bigger than 2018, but not much. And this was the first time, the most recent drop that we had, you really had everyone come out, and this was it. Everyone was, I told you so. They were predicting this. And, of course, they've been predicting this for the entire chart here. Anybody who's predicting now and claiming they got it right, they got it right in 2018. They got it right when it crashed in 2016. They got it right at the end of 2015. They got it right at the end of 2014. They got it right in January, February 2014. They got it right the whole time. Every time the stock market goes down, they come out with the I told you so, unsustainable, the whole argument. Now, the most recent stock market dip that we had in December, that was the worst. That was the worst since 2007 or 8, I believe. It was the worst, at least for the period on this chart in percentage terms. And it was also the first time that we actually had public announcement that on Christmas Eve that the plunge protection team or the President's Working Group on Financial Matters was going to get involved. And that's when Secretary Treasury Munchkin, whatever his name is, met with the banks to find out their liquidity. And we never found out exactly what was said at the plunge protection team. Excuse me. But ever since December 24th, we have to inform everybody that the stock market is up 10%. And that's a pretty big deal to be up 10% in less than a month. And in fact, for the last 4 trading sessions, we've also gone higher. So this leads to the question. Did everybody who I told you so, are they in for another year of, oops, wait till next year, and then when it drops, this is the big one. This is the big one. Because I tell you, right now, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, this is the 6th time since 2014 that we've heard this and that we've been through this. And it was unsustainable. I mean, I don't have the chart going back further, but if you go from all the way back to 2009 and you follow a chart, it follows the same pattern. It ratcheted up. It just looks like 2015 isn't very high because we've basically gone up 70-80% since then. Now, let's look over here. This is just the last 6 months, and you can see what's happened, that 10% rise since December 24th. Look at that big green candle. Yeah, the big ratcheting up, and then this is through yesterday here, and that candle has moved up all the way to 24,000. Right now, the Dow Jones, We didn't give you the numbers, and we didn't even give you the crypto numbers, but that's all right. We'll get to them in a second. The Dow Jones is at 23,879, so this does take that into account. But again, a 10% rise off of the bottom, and that's clearly as a result of plunge protection team intervention. Now, we don't know if they're still intervening. Sometimes it's just enough to have what you call a put. We've also had, since then, Fed President Powell, Chairman Powell, other Fed presidents, all slamming the brakes on and saying, well, we're going to wait and see. It's not on a set course, interest rate hikes. Now, remember, a lot of people keep saying that they want to crush the stock market to harm Trump. The dangerous game there, because the stock market gets crushed. Remember, the Fed itself has its own reputation. They created this bubble, and they can't be seen to have created a bubble that's going to collapse. So they have to keep pushing unsustainable air into it. So I would imagine, if they can, they would like to, this is my guess, to try to keep this going forward, because if they were to crush it, and the way they might crush it would be to continue to raise interest rates, and if they continue to raise interest rates, well then the stock market would probably roll over, and then it would be game over for the stock market. But that's not good for the Fed either, because their and that could lead Trump to decide that he is going to take real firm action against the Fed. It wouldn't be past him to start firing people and to make a real mess of it. And so I think they're aware of that. There is that nuclear option that he could get involved with. Now, let me pull up. I asked some questions earlier today whether you guys think that I hope we're not getting cut off. We haven't got cut off once yet tonight. I hope I'm not jinxing myself. But while I'm going over to pull out this poll, I hope I don't get cut off, but I'll know when I got cut off. All right. We only got 21 votes on it, but that's all right. That'll give us an understanding. And I see that we have some doubting Thomases, some people from Missouri, Show Me State, and so on. I asked a question, and I'm going to throw it up here. And the question was, do you think that the stock market will be able to hold gains or increase in 2019? And 2/3 of you said no way, Jose. I happen to think they will. I've been saying this every year that, yes, it's unsustainable. It's unsustainable. At some point, this is going to have to happen. It's not a market. When you hear somebody say, oh, well, we're just going to get together with the plunge protection team. We're going to see what we can do. And then, boom, it goes up 10%. And you say dead cat bounce. It never was a live cat. It's a fake cat. And they move that cat up and down. When Trump is out there bragging about the 401ks, he either has to be an idiot, which is a possibility, or he knows that they have the ability to move these markets. Because you don't have to, look, we've talked about this. The last 10 years, the stock market's gone up threefold, and the GDP is only gone up 25-fold, and earnings aren't up 300%, 400%. So this is driven by manipulation. Now, here's another reason. You can't have this. Swiss National Bank, check this out, actually lost money. Now, how does a central bank lose money? They print it. Well, they invest in FANGs in the United States. They have $100+ billion in stocks. They own Apple, but not only do they own big name stocks, they own like Tesla. It doesn't have any dividend, doesn't have any profit. They own all of these stocks. Why? They're trying to make money, and they're trying to devalue. Maybe they're trying to devalue the franc by throwing money at the stock market. What I think, they're actually all in agreement. All the central banks, they're all involved. Bank of Japan buys Japanese debt. The European Central Bank buys European company bonds, not just Euro bonds. The Fed has never bought, at least openly, and put on its balance sheet U.S. Corporate bonds or securities. They've only bought agency debt and from the United States, like Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, that crap, and then U.S. Treasuries. But that would eventually happen, I believe. The stock market went down and the plunge protection team couldn't do it. All they would do is they would go to Congress and say, oh, we want to have the Fed to have the ability to buy stocks, and you guarantee you those politicians would vote for that. And then the fact that the Fed was going to be buying stocks in the stock market, just like Swiss National Bank, and then that bear market is over quick, fast, and in a hurry. It's not right. I don't advocate any. Remember, a lot of times when I predict stuff, doesn't mean I advocate it. It's where I see it headed. Just like with Trump with the wall, it's how I analyze. Just like when I say gold silver ratio unsustainable, it's just how I see it. And I think here, I think they might be able to. I do agree that it is unsustainable, but so is your life. And the question is, how long is unsustainable? And it's the old Keynesian concept that markets can remain irrational longer than you can remain solvent. I like to say markets can remain manipulated longer than you can remain solvent. And I think these markets are highly manipulated. They're tied into politics. They're tied into the existence of these institutions. Remember, if stock markets crash, people have to have confidence in the Fed. All this banking stuff, people have to have confidence in it so they continue to make fortunes. They can't allow it to crash. The only way they can allow it to crash is if they have a plan to build it back up. That's another story with the cryptocurrencies. We're not going to get into that right now. But one other thing I want to show you, I made this little chart here just to show you what's happened since January. This doesn't include the 10% rise in the Dow Jones since December 24th. But this does show you we've got a 3.1% gain so far this year in the Dow. Gold is only up 1.1%. Silver is only up 1.7%. You know, so already the Dow is outperforming gold and silver. Now, gold and silver are grinding higher, which is nice, but it looks like there's a little bit of a turbo under the Dow Jones, especially since December 24th. This is since December 31st. Now, Bitcoin, let's do the cryptocurrencies. Bitcoin is up almost 8% this year. It had gotten as low as $3,200 last year. It's now currently over $4,000. Right now, according to Coinbase, is at $4,013. That 4033 number is a coin market cap number, which is an aggregate of a bunch of exchanges. So Bitcoin on Coinbase, the Coinbase numbers are generally lower than the aggregate on coin market cap because some of the foreign exchanges trade Bitcoin a lot higher. But right now, approximately, Bitcoin is over 4,000, is up about 8% this year. Litecoin right now is at 38.76 on Coinbase, and it's probably about where that is on CoinMarketCap. I did these numbers about 2 hours ago. They're pretty much the same. But Litecoin's up 30% since the beginning of the year in just 9 days. And that shows you what can happen in these crypto markets. So if you just bought Litecoin on December 31st and you sold it today, you would have made an annual gain. I mean, that is a great annual gain if you can make 30% in a year. Remember, we've shown with gold. Gold has not gone up in the last 16 years, even 30%. Hasn't gone down 30%, but the idea is that these cryptocurrencies do move, and they do move quick, fast, and in a hurry. Let's get to see what y'all are saying in the comments here. And I got to get you some mugs up there. Got to get some mug sales going as well. If you haven't ordered your mug this year, and that was one of your New Year's resolutions, well, you got to get to it. And let me get you some images, and then we're going to take your comments, questions, thoughts, ideas, and so on. Let me give you that. All right, let me see what you guys are saying. All right. Okay, I'm going to pull it up. Right. Where's Seamus tonight? We haven't seen our friend Seamus. We will get him back on. I heard Seamus was very popular. Gives nice color. How you doing, Louis? He says. But I can't find what I'm looking for. It isn't working. All right. All right, we'll leave that. And let's see where we are. All right, let's pull it up here. Get the first one. All right, Scott is here. Andrew is here. Scott Wardell. Morgan, not a lightweight or flyweight. Keep your left up. Yeah, I don't know. as I mentioned at the beginning with this so-called debate, I don't know what there is to debate. Because I don't think you can debate the future. Like if you think gold is going to go higher, silver is going to go higher, I'm not sure that there's anything to debate. That's just an opinion or a projection. If you want to debate the past is based on the facts, and we all know that you can't debate what happened because it happened. Now, if you want to say, well, it should have gone higher and I would have been right if 30 wasn't the bottom or 20 wasn't the bottom, well, that's not a winning argument. I wouldn't even get into something like that. So I don't know what this format is going to be with this. I'd call it a discussion between David Morgan and myself rather than a debate. But if people want to pitch it as a debate, that's fine. All right, let's see. Scott got excited. Let's see. Unsealed indictments. Chucky's never been misleading. All right. Ann Holloman says just print money. Now, why would you want to just print money? Now, the question is, I know that most people every year think that this is it. This is the big one. And it comes in twofold. That the stock market's going to go down because it's unsustainable. And two, silver is set to skyrocket. Now, remember, I do have in my projection this year, and I never do this, but once in a while I've made a few offhand predictions, but I don't make them on a regular basis. I think that silver will go higher with the caveat that it'll be led by gold, and if it does go higher, then silver will follow, and we might get a $6-7 increase. However, if the plunge protection team decides that as part of boosting the stock market, they have to nail alternative assets like gold and silver, then that's not going to happen. I'm not sure that they need to put a lid on the gold and the silver in order to boost the stock market, but we haven't seen those smash downs, although it does seem to be that they're trying to hold it down below $1,300. But we'll see how it goes. Tossing Molotovs. Too many ifs regarding the Supreme Court. Now the ifs, I'll let you figure out what the ifs are. I mean, to me, the if is it'll go. First of all, it's possible, but unlikely, that if Trump does decide to go the emergency route, that the Ninth Circuit doesn't even bother. They just don't want to embarrass themselves anymore because they know the Supreme Court will overrule them. But I think they'll still do whatever they can to stop it. So they'll throw up an injunction based on whatever legal reasoning they can concoct. But I'm not sure. The only if is whether the Supreme Court says, yes, it's a valid emergency, that the president... I'm sorry, the Supreme Court won't determine whether it's emergency. Remember, courts they try not to get involved in determining business judgments. They just say, or whether there is an emergency, but whether they try to show deference in the case of business judgment, and in the case of presidential discretion, whether there's emergency, they show deference to that. They're not going to have a factual analysis and say, this is not an emergency. When I was referencing the business judgment rule, some of you may have remembered that when I talk about manipulation, and it looks like, well, why would a company do all these naked shorts and lose all their money all at once? On its face, the court's not going to say, well, no one would do that. That's stupid. We're going to impose our superior business skill and acumen and say, well, we would never trade like that. Therefore, since we would never trade like that, but you're a court and you don't really trade, therefore, you traded like that. You must either be a moron, and we don't think you are. We think you did it on purpose. We think that's evidence of manipulation. Absence of some other piece of information that indicates they indeed wanted to manipulate the market, other than just the trade itself, then the court's just going to say, well, look, people want to do stupid things with their money. Who are we to say what's stupid? We're not traders. We don't know. It's the same thing with interpreting a statute that says the president can declare a national emergency. It would have to be so ridiculous on its face that he said that he lost his favorite cufflink and he declared a national emergency. Well, then it would never even get to the Supreme Court. It would go to the 25th Amendment because this guy's off his rocker. So the point is, if he declares a national emergency over the border, the Supreme Court is going to show the deference because the statute says he can declare a national emergency. Just like the travel ban got upheld because the statute says the president can exclude from the country admission for whatever reason he decides, for whatever class, for whatever period of time. That's what the statute says. If you don't like what the statute says, then the Congress has to change the statute and not give the president that power. But you can't say he's not allowed to exercise the power. And that's what the Supreme Court said. But the Ninth Circuit said, hold on a minute, he's not allowed to do that. And it had to go to the Supreme Court and had to say, yes, he's allowed to do that. So that's what I think is going to happen. All right, I laugh at Bloomberg opinion page. They have no idea who the boss is. All right. You're beginning to sound like those who say it can be rigged forever. No, Scott, I've been saying for years that it can be rigged for a long period of time. Never forever. Nothing is forever. Surely you don't believe that the power of the force is that great. Yes, I do. Look, we've seen, if you look at those charts, it looked like it was game over and end game and collapse. Look at Shemitah. All the people have dollar dies in 2015. We've seen everybody make prediction that this is it. This is the year. And the other thing, $10 trillion is unsustainable. $15 trillion debt unsustainable. $19, once it's at 19 trillion, then it's, so what? It's at 20 trillion. It's at 22 trillion. If they've managed to keep the house of cards up at 10 trillion, why can't they do it at 20 trillion? Unsustainable. Well, yes, eventually everything is. But the question is, just because something is inevitable doesn't mean it's imminent. There's another cliche right there. Mate, Schiller ratio is 28-6-1. Yeah, and that would matter if people were buying stocks on the basis of price-earnings ratios. If it really mattered, Tesla would never be a public company. Think about what Tesla is. And again, this isn't investment advice, buy or sell, long or short. Company makes no money. The CEO goes on a YouTube channel smoking dope, insulting the SEC, typing tweets to impress his girlfriend that he's going to take the company private at a price 30% higher than it was. I mean, and the company makes no money. And it's worth $30-40 billion. So you can't even try to rationalize where the market is today compared to where it once was or what it should be. It shouldn't be. I mean, if actually there was what you call a free market with no intervention from the Fed, no intervention from the plunge protection team, Swiss National Bank not buying it, of course the stock market would be lower. Stock market has never gone up 10 years in a row the way it has the last 10 years. It's since the financial crisis they decide to just keep boosting the thing here. Jeffrey Gott says, right, Trump has the power to keep the market up. Apparently he does. Look, if the price of the market goes down and they don't want it to go down, you'll never know it. They can go in, they can print money, and they could just buy stuff. They can buy all kinds of puts, calls, whatever they need to do to drive the market higher. And another Italian bank rescued today, says AG Monster. I saw that. Yeah, they don't report on this stuff. All right. There you go. Mate says, Scott, why not? They print the money. They're buying the market. It'll last as long as they want it to. And the reason we don't have hyperinflation is because we really should be in a massive deflation. All they're doing, remember, we talked about the idea of what the purpose of QE was. It was to increase the asset prices of stocks and real estate when really nothing was going on with those assets. Meaning, why should a house that falls to $240,000 and nothing happens to the house be bid up to $550,000? House isn't any better. It's just worth more. Why is it worth more? Because they printed money and lowered interest rates so people could pay more for it. House isn't any better. Same thing with the stocks on a relative basis. Yeah, maybe they grew earnings 3%, 4%, but the stock price goes up 130%. Why? It's the same stupid company growing at 3%. But people can't save money, so they throw it in the stock market. And that's how they keep it going. A wise man said once government central banks begin intervention, they can't stop. It's like plastic surgery, the same thing. Look at Michael Jackson. A little incision here. Okay, maybe it looked a little better. by the end of his life, he just never stopped. Couldn't even tell. I mean, he was unrecognizable what he looked like when he was a young man. All right, let's see. There are reports made, says Denmark and some others are buying more than half their GDP in U.S. stocks and treasuries. It's all a fraud. Yeah. Since when does Swiss National Bank not only buying stocks, but buying garbage stocks, buying unicorn stocks? I have a chart. I once went through their SEC filing, pulled out the absolute garbage that they bought. They don't. You would think, well, okay, it's okay. They buy AT&T, it's a solid dividend stock. No, they're buying like I don't want to start trashing stocks, but they were stocks that are absolute unicorns, not just Tesla, stocks that have no earnings, and they don't care. They're in there buying them. All right, what else we got here? Well, I think that's it, unless I've got on... No, I got on live chat, so that's all your questions here. So I want to thank everyone for joining me tonight. We're going to get out of here again in under 1 hour, so I want to thank everyone for joining me tonight. Make sure you get your Smaulgld mugs, or you become a Smaulgld patron. I have 20 patrons. I was looking at some of the other patrons. I get very envious. JSnip has over 1,000 patrons. Can you believe that? Unbelievable. And I have 20. All right. Well, I want to thank everyone for joining me tonight, and we will see you tomorrow. Thank you very much. That doesn't go further.